Welcome to Whispered Hiring, the podcast where we talk with senior leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow go-to-market talent. I'm Andy Mowat, founder of Whispered. We built Whispered because we know when you're a senior leader, those roles aren't posted, they're whispered. Today, I'm joined by Vikas Rasa, CRO of Rasa. Vikas, great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'm looking forward to the chat.
I am too. Just for quick background for folks, I've known Vikas for a while from GTM Fund. We're both limited partners there. He's been a go-to-market leader in AI since before it really existed at Yellow.ai, Regal, which was voice agents, and then Customer, which I remember that one really well. It was kind of one of the innovators in AI support. So great to have you here.
Oh, I'm really excited to have the conversation. This is one of my passions. So building great teams is a lot of fun, and I think where I spend a lot of my time. So really looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, you've thought deeply about it before we hit record. We were just going deep on some of this. Like, I love how thoughtful you are about hiring. Maybe we can kind of kick it off with like you joined Rasa how many months ago? Like 5, 6 months ago, or
Not even, I think 4 months ago, probably.
4 months ago? Okay, great. And like, how did you approach the executive team, your executive team underneath you, your go-to-market leadership team? How did you figure out where the opportunities were to hire or to supplement the team? And how did you kind of go through that evaluation process, becoming a new leader at an AI company that's growing very fast?
I think the biggest thing, when you come into any business is, just understanding the people, spending as much time as you can with them to understand what their overarching career ambition is, what are they doing in the business. But one thing that becomes quite interesting when you haven't actually recruited somebody and onboarded them is what's their history, what's their experience, what have they done before. um, because as we start to assess what this particular business needs as it moves forward, what you as a leader are trying to understand is, do people have the skills I need for where we're trying to take the business? Or is it somebody I need to invest in? Or is the gap so significant that potentially I need to go and augment the team? So that's critical, because I think one of the challenges when you come into a situation as a leader is you see the person that's there, you see maybe what they're doing, but you don't understand the history. And I'm a big believer. I think I have a core responsibility of putting people in a position to succeed. I often make the comment, like, I think it's bullying behavior when you're holding somebody to a standard that they're not equipped for. So, for example, if I've got let's say, business development leader who's never run a team at scale, who's never seen it operate at scale, I can't come in and expect him or her to immediately be able to meet my expectation, right? If I'm used to operating a BD, having teams that operate at a certain scale and pace. So I think that's a really key thing for any leader to do when they join a business.
I like that. You said kind of the when you haven't recruited or onboarded somebody. I think you're right. There's that set of conversations, which is what were the expectations you had when you were hired? Where do you think you are? How are you tracking? Like, how do you have that conversation? I think that's a really human conversation. And is it do you take the time out to kind of like almost do a pulse check and a reset with every person that works rolls up to you?
I think you have to. I think you have to do it at the team level. Um, Look, they know that a new leader's come in. They're going to expect, by the very nature of a new leader coming in, something is going to change, right? That is just, welcome to the party. So that's the first. But then it's like the why, and sometimes the why hasn't been carefully crafted prior to your arrival. Like, why did we as a business need to go out and find this new leader? So sometimes as a new leader coming in, you kind of almost have to gauge with how well have the expectations being set as to why this leader was brought on. Because you find situations where perhaps there was somebody internal in the business who had put their hand up for the role, or maybe the person that you had, whose role you took, left in messy terms, but actually recruited the previous team or the current team, and they're very quote unquote loyal to that person. So there's all of those dynamics you need to figure out because at the end of the day, this is a people business. I don't care if you're selling AI or you're selling technology or you're selling widgets, it is a people business. So you have to understand that. So once you understand kind of the level set as to where you are, it's important to let the team know what you are looking at, what you are facing, what the expectations are, and then what how you're planning and thinking about going about it and what is expected of them. And I think I have the benefit, maybe it's the New Yorker in me. I have no problem being very honest with people because at the end of the day, I want them to be successful. One of the things I often say to the team is, look, as a chief revenue officer, I literally don't do anything. If I think about it, I mean, being a bit facetious here, but I'm the sum of the parts. I literally, it's that BDR who just came out of college, him or her has a direct impact on the success of the revenue organization as much as a strategic account executive with a $3 million quota. So for me, I need the entire team to operate at a high level. So if I don't set that expectation of what's expected of them, both from a, accountability, a way of doing their work, then I'm doing them a disservice. And I'll have the very honest conversation, especially people who've been in a business for a long time, especially in an early stage company. The company you joined from a, 0 to 1, a 1 to 5, and I went through this journey at customer where we went from 0 to X, it's very different. And you join for different reasons. The culture's different, the people are different, the speed is different. So if you're coming in as a new leader and you're going to expect the business to behave a certain way and the folks to have a certain type of temperament, etc., but I didn't sign up for that as a individual person on the team. Let's have a heart to heart. Now, some people are excited. They're like, "Oh my goodness, yeah, I joined for this." And then we had a period where things got a little quiet. I'm excited to gain the momentum back. And then there's some people who are like, "Hey, I joined when we were kind of going through this transition and things were really nice and easy and now you're asking me to like grind and get in there. I didn't sign up for this." And that's okay. It's okay to have that conversation and say, "Look, it's not for everybody." And then we can figure out like what are we going to do on an individual basis? Find you a new role, level your skills, take some time off to calibrate, or is it time to move on from the business, right? Like all of those things are certainly within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, yeah. I think you've got to get deep to be able to understand some of these things, right? Because you can have a conversation, somebody can be high level good, but I think your point around bullying behavior when you're holding someone to a standard they're not equipped for is really powerful. What is the conversation like then? What is that conversation?
Yeah, I think the first thing I try to say is what is the expectation? And if you've never done this before, are you willing to get there? And I as a leader will lean in as hard as the team member will lean in. So it's like, hey, I need you to be able to operate at this level. You've never done it before. You've never seen it done before. I'll teach you. I'll show you. But you've got to lean in because at the end of the day, like, look, we're all stretched really thin. And I have a lot of things to do in the business. So if you want me to show you how to be a better BDR, as an example, I'm happy to do that. But you've got to put in as much, if not a little bit more effort than I do.
I That resonates deeply with me. I had somebody at a company where I could see that person was not operating at the level I needed. I had the conversation and the feedback did not land. And then they kept insisting that they had those capabilities when they didn't. And I think if you're not willing to, and then I had another person at that same company where they acknowledged the feedback. And even if they weren't operating at an all-star level, they were willing to go through that process to get there. And I was willing to take a longer time with them. And so I think a lot of it is, can people take feedback on that side?
Right. And are they willing to there there was no excuse 5 years ago for not learning certain things, right? But you know this, Andy, like with the tools that are available to us today, whether your best friend is called Claude or Gemini, right, or ChatGPT, you can learn pretty much anything if you're willing to put the time and effort in, right? So, and then on top of that, you have leadership that's willing to invest in you as well. There really is no excuse. Now, unless the delta is so big, right? That then it's a whole different question, and and that's a different uh, question altogether. But if the gap is not that significant, then both parties can lean in and figure out a way to make it happen.
I think you're right with maybe so one is a plus one and then one's an exception. I think, salespeople, it used to be like you couldn't quite get the coaching and how would you get better? Now with these AI role plays, I've been going deep on those. Companies like Hyperbound are so powerful in terms of like how you, instead of saying, here, we're going to feed you a bunch of training and you may or not engage in it, we're just going to make you practice until you're good at it. And I think that's fundamentally changed. Like, how do you up level on sales? I do think strategy, cross-functional relationships, understanding how to communicate at an executive level. I don't think you can study those things with AI and get better at those things. I think you're either, I mean, maybe you will. For me, I wasn't very good at some of those things early in my career and I learned. But if I need you to get there, I don't think you can go train on those things.
No, you have to have the at bats, right? You got to let's go put it in a lived experience. I absolutely agree.
I love it. Maybe let's shift over to how do you find talent? Um, so you need to grow out your leadership team. Are you going to recruiting? Are you going to your investors like Andreessen and Excel? Are you going to your network? Like, how do you approach finding talent?
All of the above. But I think the most interesting thing I find is leaders, and I've seen this with peers. I've seen it with people who have reported into me, who when a role comes up, kind of throw it over the fence to the HR recruiting team, and then sit back and wait for candidates to come to them. And I just think that, once again, in my role, if I'm only as good as the people I have on my team, I have to take that responsibility upon myself. Not saying I don't have amazing partnerships with my recruiting team, but whether it's me sitting on LinkedIn and looking at my network and saying like, "Hey, who have I worked with before?" Right? Or talking to people or reaching out to other leaders that I've worked with and say, "Hey, I'm looking for this role. Do you know anybody? We're looking for an AE. Do you know anybody?" I'm posting on LinkedIn. I'm, having fun with it, right? I'm being thoughtful about it. Trying to get obviously a viral post where people start commenting and posting and reaching out to their friends about it. So that responsibility. I remember when I was building the team at Customer, and I must have reached out to hundreds of AEs, um, because we had one recruiter. She was amazing. But I knew as an early stage company that many people had not heard about, people were going to respond to maybe me better than a recruiter. Because once they looked at the company page, it was like, well, I've never heard of this company. Whereas obviously, maybe they look at me, they look at my background, they look at my network, and they're like, okay, this might be somebody I could work with or for. So I think that carries a lot of responsibility. And at the end of the day, it helps me accelerate. So that's a critical thing. Like time to hire is absolutely critical. Genuinely speaking, I'm going to find people that I'm, probably more likely to work with if they come through one of these sources. Not saying I haven't had some amazing people come through me cold through the recruiting function, but I want to be part of that process.
I couldn't agree more. Are there thoughtful things you do to build your network so that you can recruit better off of it?
I think there are times where I think, I used to be very, very tight on LinkedIn connections and things like that, right? And just, oh, well, I don't really know this person. Do I want to connect with them? I think over time, I've kind of looked at LinkedIn as particular as truly a social network. So, adding people there just to continue to grow the network and the exposure and get access to people. Otherwise, I would not. Um, certainly working with you at Whispered, is something that, not only as a participant, but an active member, seeing, trying to help people out, looking at the forums and what's going on there. You mentioned GTM Fund and other things that I'm doing and other networks, just constantly looking at ways to expose what the company that I'm working with is doing, why we're exciting, why you should come here. And you know, you have to navigate all of these different forums. Your investor network, as you said, and their posts, and just try to figure out how you can get access to talent, because that's really the game. I still say it's a people business. Talent wins. Finding talented people is still a challenge with all the tools we have.
I agree. I mean, first I love that you shared with Whisper. We never out people, but it was amazing to collaborate with you on your search. I think that there are so many. It's so like even though I'm probably one of the more plugged in people in RevOps, when I was at Carta, I would take a leadership role in the search just like you. I was like, I need to be part of this. I'm here. I'm sitting with a recruiter. But even then, I tap out my network. I think, and so I think we all struggle with this concept of like, how do we actually help and search and find through our network? It's actually incredibly challenging to do.
And
Yeah.
look, the biggest thing is the source of tremendous pride as a leader is you hire great people, they will work with you. They may stay at the company that you've moved on from and continue to do amazing things, or they move to other companies and do amazing things. And I always joke, I had an amazing team at Customer, and I'm like, they're all too darn expensive for me to hire again, right? Because they've all gone on to do, tremendous things. So I think that's, like I said, it's a source of great pride. But at the same time, it's like, you also look at your network and you're like, do I necessarily want to pull somebody out of that situation? Right? Because once again, I think our responsibility is first and foremost to that individual and their careers and their livelihood with their families. And so, as much as, yeah, I'd love to work with so and so again, but if he or she has gone on and they're like now, I don't know, the head of GTM at Amazon, am I going to say, well, no, leave Amazon and come work with me again, right? Like I love what I'm doing, but I don't want to do that to somebody, right, who's in a position like that. So I think that's the other thing is our networks. You reach out, you think about somebody like, oh, who would be great for this role, Andy. And I reach out to you and I look at your LinkedIn profile. You just joined a new company 4 months ago. So am I really going to pull you out of a company you just joined 4 months ago? Now you got a 4 month stint on your resume? No. So I'm like, okay, I'll reach out to Andy in 8 months and see if he's happy or not, and then maybe we'll talk. So I think those are the other factors that you have. People we're all moving at different paces, and so the intersection of that availability, is somebody looking for a new gig? Are they the right person for the role? All of that really matters.
I could not agree more. I have grown slash hired slash been lucky enough to work with rock stars at many of my companies, but I can't always bring them with me for whatever reason. Like one of the most amazing people has now moved to Australia, or they're different places and they have different life goals. I think that's so well said. There's this quote I hear a lot, right, which is if you're a sales leader and ask them who they're going to bring with them. And I kind of roll my eyes a little bit at that one. I'd be curious your take on that statement.
So it goes back to, you know, you would hope that there's people in their network that would enjoy working for them again, right? But it's like when people like say they have a Rolodex. Remember in the old days, people would say like in sales, I have a Rolodex, and then you hire them. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, our product isn't the same product of what I sold last time. So I actually don't know the right people. Or, oh, by the way, the people I knew at that account moved on. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, you don't really have a Rolodex. Oh, yeah, I guess you have a Rolodex, but not for helpful to my company. I think it's the same thing. I would prefer, yes, you want people that have a high degree of accountability. They have EQ. They have people that have enjoyed working for them before. If I was hiring or advising, I would say look at their track record of tenure of the people that worked with them at their last company,
Yeah.
the progression of those people. And like we say in the GTM world, do they have a framework or approach to go build another great team? Um, because that to me is as, if not more important, than can they bring people with them?
I could not agree more. I'm just reflecting for a second on this one. It's I think you're right. Like there's so many reasons why it might not cross to be able to bring somebody. So I've always kind of discounted that one in my head. Maybe it works for like AEs and you've got junior people, but it I think the ability to maybe this is where I was going is like back checks. Like I think a lot of people check the people that you worked for. I love to also reference check the people who worked for you, because what I've oftentimes seen is senior execs maybe one way to the exec team, but very different down. And so if you are somebody that truly has built a loyal team behind you, that would be somebody that I would figure has a high probability of doing it again.
100%. And
Yeah.
that was one of the things I was really impressed with my process at Raza was uh, my boss, CEO Melissa, so thoughtful about, this was one of the things that really impressed me, very thoughtful about who she wanted to do references with.
Yeah.
And it was included people who had worked for me, and so I thought that was critical in showing the due diligence that she was putting in to making sure she brought the right leader into the business.
We were talking before you hit record just about how you've gotten to know your boss and built a personal relationship. I think that's so rare these days, but it's honestly what a lot of people are looking for. And I mean, you can still push somebody hard, but you can still know them and build a personal relationship and show that you care. So it's neat to see that you've got that culture.
Yeah, I think it's really important. We're all asking people to do really hard things in a pressure cooker environment, not just in the business world, but you can look at the macro environment that we're all living in today. And so if you don't feel that people genuinely care about you professionally and personally, um, then it becomes I think a counterpoint to asking you to give your all. Now, I'm not a big believer in like the false premises of we're all a family and all the things that some startups tried to like sell to people before they had to let them go and all of that. But look, there's a degree of accountability, and I think that accountability is shared. We have an accountability. I have an accountability to the business. If I don't perform, then absolutely the business has a responsibility to the other employees, to the shareholders, investors, and to our customers to take the necessary action, right?
Yeah.
And that goes for everybody. But does the business also have a responsibility to make sure that A, I'm getting some growth and learning, as well as I have the flexibility to go on vacation and take care of my family and do all those things? I think it's that give and take between employee and employer that is really important, but it has to be a two-way street. It can't be one-sided.
I think so. And I think founder mode may have stirred us a little bit to that, but it's refreshing to hear how your CEO is thoughtful. Maybe shifting over to interview process. I know you had some really great thoughts on that. I think three we talked about before recording was kind of how you think about the panel and the questions, and then like who owns the decision process in the hiring. And I'd be fascinated to hear your take on those, plus anywhere else you want to dive deep on the interview process.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I think I think this was in I think it was Mark Roberger, the CRO of HubSpot, that said this, and he didn't come from a sales background, I believe. I might be talking totally out of turn, so apologies. But I think he came from a more of an engineering mindset. And when he was building the go-to-market team, I think one of the takeaways was like, how do we create a kind of a scorecard, a matrix, and how do we really evaluate people and be thoughtful about
Yeah.
that? So one of the things I took away from that, and I've kind of layered on over the years, amazing experience at Meta and learning how they, interview people and what they look for. And so there's a couple of things there where I really believe in asking, understanding when we set out who our panel interviewers are for a particular role, having a set of questions that every single person on that panel documents, shares with the rest of the group, and ask the candidates the exact same questions. Um, Here's why I think this is really important: is one, there's nothing worse, I think, from a candidate experience, and I've sat in this seat fairly recently, as you're aware,
Yeah.
and having people just wing it.
Yeah.
Or heaven forbid, somebody who starts just literally pulls up your resume. I think we've moved a little bit further away from this, but I still hear horror stories and just like go line by line through your resume and ask you to justify your existence as a human being.
There is
So,
the whole like top grading philosophy on that, but I think a lot of people don't do it. I think there are people that like, yes, I'm going to take it seriously and know why, but I agree with the winging it is just insulting to a lot of people.
and to me also, I'll interview number of people for a particular role. So how am I clearly identifying and looking at different candidates and saying whether they addressed the question appropriately if I'm asking them different things, right? So if I ask Andy a question about like, oh, well, what was your top deal you ever closed? And then another AE, Sarah, comes in and I say, well, how did you handle this particular problem? How am I understanding which one is actually more capable if the questions they're answering are fundamentally different? So that's number one.
I like
Number
that. Yeah, go ahead.
number two, and mind you, people in our world, in the GTM world in particular, are great interviews, the vast majority, right? If they're not, then you are always wondering like why are you, maybe even in this role, maybe you have a unique skill or something. But vast majority are really good at interviewing. So the other key thing for me is what I call signal. Is are you giving me an actual data point for that question? So when I set forth any interview, I did one earlier today, and I tell the candidate, I'm going to use a structured approach. If it looks like I'm reading a question, it's because I am. I ask the same questions of every person that's interviewing for this role, just so you understand. I think it's fair to you, and I think it's fair to everybody else that's going to be interviewing for this role. So that, kind of equity, being fair and equitable. The other piece is the only thing I might ask you to do is to give me a bit more context or detail. That's the only way, the only follow up question I'm going to ask. And the one piece of advice I give every candidate, whether I'm hiring for a director of revenue operations, a head of BDR, an AE, is give me actual examples. It's the only way I can really understand your lived experience. If you just give me conjecture, so for example, I'm interviewing a director of revenue operations. I know this is near and dear to your heart. And I talk about data hygiene. And it's like, well, no, I'm a big believer in data hygiene and I set up all these Salesforce things. Or is it more valuable to say, hey, when I was at Carta, I set up the data reports and the flags that we had going into Slack when this wasn't done in a timely fashion triggered this event. Now I understand what you actually did, and I can kind of translate that into the problems my business is facing to say, can you actually help us? Right? Was if you talk about conjecture, I don't know if you actually did it or not, or you read it on a web page somewhere preparing for this meeting. So I think that is really important. So I think that's the interview process. So I'll pause, follow ups, and then I can give you kind of like how we get to decision making and some other things as well.
Yeah, yeah, I love it, and I think you're right. Stories are critical. Let me ask you this: like, how does a candidate successfully build a rapport with your interview style? Right? Like, I'm always trying to short circuit the interview process on my side. I'm like, I think I've told you my one of the tactics. I'm like, hey, it's like I got a lot of questions. I'm excited to interview with Vikas, and you're like, most interviewers will be like, let's start with your questions, and from there I can kind of like really steer it and frankly learn and make sure it's a fit both ways. But clearly you've got a style and a process where if I tried to hijack that, it probably wouldn't go well. So how do people, I think there's like the answers they give, but there's also like building rapport with somebody. Like, how do you go about that part of the process?
So the first question I ask every candidate, and this allows us to kind of ease into it, is I'd love to hear a little bit about what been doing most recently. What was the impact you had? Why are you in the market? And what is it about our company that you're excited about being part of this process? Right? And so that's a really like a way for me to, and then we, obviously I'll reflect on that because if they're like, I'm currently at company ABC and I've had, oh yeah, no, I've heard about them. That's great. So I think there's a little bit of that rapport building, and that's the kind of foundational question I ask every candidate, and regardless of role, before I get into like the specific role specific questions. I always make sure the candidate knows I'm going to carve out enough time at the end for them to ask their questions because I tell them this process I believe is more important for you than it is for us. At the end of the day, we're a business, you're a human being, right? So I want to make sure you have a lot of opportunity in the market. I'm sure you're really good at what you do. And so I want to make sure you get your questions answered. And if we don't have enough time today, if we do progress in the process, I will make myself available to you to address all the things that are important to you because I know how critical a decision this is for you and your family as you pursue this. So that's another piece. But there's no doubt, Andy, that look, we all have egos. There's nothing better than somebody who comes to a or when they're answering their questions. This is even better. I interviewed somebody quite recently who, as he was answering some of his questions, he said, I listened to a podcast that you were on, and you actually mentioned this, and it resonated with me because and he used my experience and the research he'd done, and kind of like it was a flex. Let's call it what it is. There's no doubt as a human being that I didn't like lean back a little and soften a bit because I was like, oh, you took the time to listen to my podcast. There's nothing better than when somebody listens to me. So, those things. But hijacking the interview to me it's a non-starter. I actually had that happen fairly recently. I went through the exact same opening that I give everybody in terms of I'm going to ask you these questions. This is the approach, and the person didn't want to hear it, and even worse, they threw a deck up and said I'm going to walk you through my deck I've prepared for this, and I literally the first time I spoke was 20 minutes in.
We teach our kids two things. We always say ownership, 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 and read the room, read the room. Um, I use a similar version of your question. The question you use is like the why this company, why you, why now type thing. I A good chunk of people take themselves out right there because they're not succinct and clear. Is that what you observe as well too?
100%. And also, you can kind of see who is winging it, who is really interested in the role, or who's just out there interviewing with every company under the sun, right? When I ask you, like, why are you interested in our process, right? I mean, if you're good, you could be interviewing at 20 different companies. Why'd you pick us? And that little anchor there is really the other thing I find really interesting, and obviously I went through it quite a bit myself, and I do appreciate that. I think it's become a non-starter almost at the leadership level, but I'm still surprised at how many people at the IC level don't have a exercise. And I think the exercise to me has been one of the critical success factors in every team I've ever built. Because once again, I think people, particularly AEs, I would say even experienced BDRs, SCs, are really good at interviewing. And if you just, especially in a virtual world, where sometimes, and this is something I'm still getting to grips with, we haven't met the person face to face. So giving them the exercise, A, puts them in a bit of an uncomfortable situation, allows them to show what they're capable of. But most importantly, I love the last, let's say 15, 20 minutes of that exercise where we as a panel get to give feedback. And I love to see how people react. I mean, that is where you separate good from great. And because the biggest thing for us is coachability. Are
Yeah.
you coachable? Can you learn something new, whether it's our product, whether it's our market, whether it's how you work with us, or maybe the play we want to run? But if you're not coachable and you're set in your ways, I mean, I've had amazing AE candidates on paper, President's Club multiple years. I had one who was very friendly with the CEO of the company I worked for. He'd worked with him before and was like, referred in by the CEO. And we did this exercise, and we did what we did, and sometimes it's nitpicky, but if the person does a great job, you have to find something. This person hadn't done a great job. They'd winged it because they thought they had the gig in hand. But we gave them some feedback, and it got really contentious. And I was like, you know, and it was like, well, and I was like, well, why would you want to work with us if you don't think we can offer value to you, right? Especially if you're coming into an IC role. So, yeah, I find that's always an interesting one.
I like that. How about with AI? I'm finding you're getting not necessarily slop, but the bar is kind of like everyone's able to deliver similar levels of presentation right now. Like basically, if you give somebody a take home, and we just literally had a discussion about this with 10 Whispered members this morning, you will put it into ChatGPT, you will put it into Gamma, you will go back and forth, and you will use it to do your ideation. And so you're going to end up with a very similar set of stuff, right? Like I used to hire people on Upwork all the time, and I would just put in like three really direct questions, and most people would ignore them. And I was like, great, I'm not interviewing those people. But now when I hire somebody on Upwork, I get 100 amazing, perfectly relevant applications every time. And so it's becoming harder and harder to sort that. So I'm seeing some companies say, we're not going to do a take home exercise anymore. We're going to get you on a board and just let you figure it out. Like, how do you approach, like, is AI going to kill the exercise?
Human still has to deliver it. If it was a take home, back in the day, we used to do like writing samples for BDRs, right? Like send me, I need you to break into, I don't know why we always pick Disney. Maybe, I don't know if it's Disney
Uh,
used to be a very hard account to get into, but we'd always use that. And we say, okay, like you have to go after the head of contact center or head of customer experience at Disney, draft an email and try to break through. I think, yeah, now you're just reading a written artifact. That, look, it's no different for the work products we create or our children are creating in school, etc. That would be, I would agree, would be at that point, this point, it should be pretty high quality. The exercises I'm talking about are delivered. So in person.
yes.
What we're really gauging is the person's style. Their how do they read the room, as you said before? How do they look to us for answers? How do they take feedback? That's what we're looking for. The artifact itself, I'm not saying isn't important. It has to be in the range of being reasonable, but walk me through your thought process. If, once again, it's like a student. If the whole thing is written by AI, like let's say for example with RevOps, I ask you to do an annual planning exercise and I give you some metrics and ask you to create a plan for the year. If I start asking you some fundamentals and you don't understand, and I'm like, wait, you said we needed to create $35 million in pipeline, but where did you take into account our sales cycle time? Right?
Whereas if they said, no, actually, I assume the sales cycle was here, and I've actually segmented it by enterprise, mid, and SMB, and here's how I'm
Exactly.
thinking about it. Like, then they're going the next step beyond as well too.
Right. And by the way, here's the four things you guys didn't put into your request, which I thought about, right? So I think those are the types of things. I think last thing as we kind of wrap up on the interviewing topic is, you know, when I was started my career, a lot of times we would hear the term, it's the hiring manager's decision. Uh, and I've really evolved off of that. I'm not saying, if ultimately we have two amazing candidates that the panel has put through to the process, that it shouldn't be the hiring manager's decision at that point. I mean, that's a great opportunity for that person if that's the case. But where I really push back is if you're on a panel and you say no at some point in the process, and the continues, because that's when you get that cronyism where you get people who just hire from their network, where you're not getting full, and then you're not. I'll never forget. I was at a company and we hired an AE. The AE wasn't doing too well out of the gate, and then somebody who was on that hiring panels was like, well, I knew this was going to happen. That's why I was a no. And I remember turning around and I was like, well, if you were a no, why the heck did we hire him? And it was like, not my decision. The hiring manager had worked with him before and decided that, wanted to pull him in. So to me, I always tell people this, being on a hiring panel is a privilege. Like that means we respect your opinion and your judgment. So I ask people to take it really seriously. And there's times where, you get people who like, I'm too busy to interview, and you got the recruiter who's like trying to chase them, and they're like, well, I'm too busy. It's not, I take them off. I take them off the interview panel. I'm like, if you're too busy, this is critical for the business. It's also important for the candidate experience. So if this isn't important for you, then that's fine. Go focus on your day job. We'll find somebody who it is. And also, I also tell people, if you have somebody on your hiring panel and you don't actually respect their decision or feedback,
Get them off.
why
Yeah.
do you have them? Take them off.
This
I'd
is what
rather have,
Amazon does so well with their bar riser program, right? Like they've really been thoughtful about it. I think your approach works if two things. One, you're really thoughtful about how you construct panels, and second one is you give them very structured things to ask if they don't wing it. And then the other thing that I've seen happen is companies can't make a decision, so they keep inserting more and more and more people on the panel. And so I've been in those before where like, oh, the CFO is going to interview him. Oh, the CEO is going to interview him. Oh, this person. And you're just like, at some point, you as a hiring manager are completely disempowered on that as well, too. So there's a balance. I think you have to have a lot of panel discipline to be able to succeed at what you're talking about.
and that's why when you set it from the set it up front, do you follow it? And look, we've all been on the other side. My only feedback to, quality candidates, and hopefully everybody out there believes they're a quality candidate, is if somebody's putting you through that, like at some point, draw the line. Like at what point do you say, because to me, it's a reflection. There's a couple of things like going back to what we're talking about, like as a candidate, and I was in that seat, recently, I would show up to a meeting and people being late, right? Second is people winging it, right? And then people keep changing the process. The goalpost keeps moving. It means you don't actually know what you want. You really
Well,
haven't thought this
that's the
through.
thing I've observed a lot. Like I talk to a CRO a day now, and most of them don't know what they want. They've posted 3 or 4 versions of a chat GPT on their site. They're interviewing everybody. They're interviewing from like SVP down to junior manager, and it's a mess. And so I think the term I was playing with somebody is like if you're calibrating mid cycle, if you're still trying to figure out what you need if you're using the interview process to figure out what you need, it's going to be painful on the candidates. And I see it
100%.
all the time. Well, we could probably talk for hours. I'm sorry, this is probably where we ran out of time, but the amount of thought you put into it, how candid you are, and just how much of a human being you are in this process is just so great. So thank you for sharing your insights, Vegas.
No, really appreciate it. I mean, we're all out here. We're all trying to do big, amazing things. We have to do it with the right people. Yeah, I mean, I think at this stage of, I'm not going to age myself here, but at the end of the day, like I think the more we can think about this, just so everybody's worried about AI and is AI going to do, it's like, you know what? It's still a human being, people-driven business, and so that's what we really need to lean into as a collective community.
I agree. And I think humans and AI will do great things together. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we won't destroy each other. I heard something which is we are 200 years as a technological society. It's just a blip. It'll be interesting to see what the next 200 years hold. Thank you, Vikas.
Thank you.